The fourth window of World Cup qualifying is just around the corner for the U.S. men's national team. Let's take a look at the roster, which just dropped 28 names. Let's take a look and see how this team could potentially line up. My name is Alex and welcome back to my channel. We're going to, as I said before, take a look at the World Cup qualifying roster for the January/February World Cup qualifying window. The U.S. will be taking on El Salvador first in Columbus, Ohio, then Canada on the road in Hamilton, and then back to the U.S. for Minnesota, where we welcome Honduras. This is the largest roster that Greg Berhalter has named so far in World Cup qualifying, 28 players, and he's credited this to COVID and the uncertainty surrounding that. That being said, though, even though it is a big roster, there are still some really big names which have been left off, some for various different reasons, and some interesting inclusions for sure. So let's go position by position and take a look at who got called up for this camp. We'll start with the goalkeepers, and the first real big surprise right here is the inclusion of Gaga Slonina. I mean, the other three goalkeepers really did pick themselves, but Slonina of the Chicago Fire came in for the last third or so of last season, earned the starting job for the Chicago Fire, and is now going to be the starter going into 2022. And there's been some European interest in him as well, though the Fire don't plan on selling him for 2 to 3 years. But he's probably the highest potential goalkeeper in the pool right now, so though I don't think he's at the national team level yet, I don't necessarily think this is a necessary call-up. I think he's just kind of here, to bring him into camp, get him the experience of being in that environment. And also, there's also the possibility that Matt Turner could have to finalize a potential transfer to Arsenal, which would be very, very interesting. If that does happen, maybe he does kind of fill into that third slot if, say, Turner has to go to London to sign a contract and meet up with Arsenal Football Club. Other than that, though, I'm expecting Zach Steffen to be the number one for this team. Greg Berhalter has preferred him for the last 3 games against Costa Rica, Mexico, and Jamaica. And, of course, he can play out of the back a lot better. Though that being said, Steffen is on a yellow card, so say Steffen picks up a yellow in one of these games, Turner might have to step in. The Centerbacks are interesting because this is where the first real big exclusion is. We'll just read through first who we do have. Mark McKenzie from Genk, Chris Richards from Hoffenheim, Miles Robinson from Atlanta United, and Walker Zimmerman from Nashville. So Richards, Robinson, and Zimmerman are the 3 guys who started games last window, and all 3 put up pretty good performances, and all 3 have put up pretty good performances in World Cup qualifying. Miles Robinson's been, along with Tyler Adams, this team's most consistent performer and its best center back over all of 2021. Walker Zimmerman really was not in favor in September. Yes, he was in the squad, but didn't play a single minute. He was the only outfield player to do so in that window. October, he got 2 starts, even wore the armband once, and was really impressive. By November, he was the first choice center back along with Miles Robinson. He started both games and was incredible against Mexico. He had Raul Jimenez in his back pocket. So Walker Zimmerman definitely, though he is out of season, that's the other thing. Walker Zimmerman and Miles Robinson both haven't played a competitive game since the end of the MLS playoffs, where they were both knocked out pretty early on. So that's where Chris Richards comes into play. He's been superb for Hoffenheim, and obviously he's going to be hopefully getting some starts in this window, because right now he is right up there with Miles Robinson as our best center backs. Mark McKenzie, same thing as in November. He doesn't really need to play. He's just kind of the 4th guy to be a locker room guy. And that's fine, because he shouldn't need to play. 4th center back shouldn't really need to get that many minutes at all. And yeah, he hasn't really been playing that much for Genk lately either. I know they haven't had a whole lot of games because of the winter break, but yeah. The exclusion here is John Brooks, because John Brooks was left out of the November roster for disciplinary reasons. Why was John Brooks left out of this roster, though? Berhalter doesn't typically have disciplinary reasons that go beyond. I think there's something else at play here. I think that there may be some sort of tension to the locker room, because John Brooks, you don't really bring him in if he's not going to be a starter. If he's not the starter, he might start to cause issues. And with Robinson and Richards clearly ahead of him in the pecking order, and probably, at least in Berhalter's eyes, and based on the last window, Walker Zimmerman as well, maybe you don't want to bring in John Brooks if he's going to be the first choice and might only get 1 game. Other than that, though, there are a few other guys. Aaron Long is not fully recovered. I do expect him to get into the squad again when he is recovered. At least in Berhalter's eyes, he's probably a top choice center back and will probably end up being a starter at the World Cup. And Justin Shea isn't really in the picture right now for the national team, but he did just secure a move to Hoffenheim, so very good for him. And Matt Miazga really hasn't, he's just been incredibly inconsistent, and there's no way he's going to be in this national team anytime soon, maybe ever again, because his relationship with Berhalter clearly isn't that incredible, which is quite sad, because on his day he can be a really good defender. For the fullbacks, now this is probably the most controversial position on this entire roster. So there are five fullbacks, should I say. 4 of them are right backs, though, which doesn't make a lot of sense. There's only 1 left back, so let's read through them. The 4 right backs are Reggie Cannon, Serginho Dest, Brooks Lennon, and DeAndre Yedlin. The lone left back is Anthony Robinson. Now, you'd expect Anthony Robinson can only start 2 out of 3 games. He's not going to be able to start all 3, which means someone else is going to have to start a game at left back at least once. Serginho Dest is the obvious choice. I'm sure Kellen Acosta could also do that job. Berhalter said that Cannon and Yedlin can also fill in at left back. That was very curious to me because neither of them have ever done that I'm aware of, that I can think of. I think Reggie Cannon I can think of once for Dallas. That's about it. But other than that, I mean, Dest, Cannon, Yedlin, Robinson, they're all solid. Probably should have just been these 4. And maybe a left back like Vines, Bello, even Jonathan Gomez. But it is what it is. Brooks Lennon, I don't really think there's a reason he has to be here. Because I don't know what he's done to earn this call-up. Especially when there are 3 right backs already in the squad. And Joe Scally absolutely should have been here. Now, I know his form for Mönchengladbach has dropped off a lot since what it was at the beginning of the season. But still, the option to have him on right back and left back, and defensively he's better than a lot of the guys here. I would have loved to have Joe Scally in this team. And I think, Berhalter's not the biggest fan of him. It's understandable. Managers have players they like and they don't like. But I don't know what he needs to do at this point to get a call-up. He didn't get a single minute in November, and he really, quite frankly, should be in this team. For the midfielders, we had 7, and there's also a couple annoying things here that are in and out of control. So reading through the defensive midfielders, we'll start right there. Kellen Acosta and Tyler Adams, those 2 pick themselves. Those are the 2 6s. The only concern is that Tyler Adams is on a yellow. We don't know when he's going to get that. It's going to happen eventually. It makes things a little bit tricky. Do you start Kellen Acosta the first game so that Adams is available for Canada guaranteed? It's a couple things that are going to have to go into the calculations, but these 2 are the 6s. And maybe if Adams does pick up a yellow card in the first game and does have to miss that second game, I think we might see another 6 get called in. It's probably going to be Jackson Ewell. Attacking midfielders are, I guess in Berhalter's system, they really are the 8s. And there were 5. And I think this position's a bit of a miss from Berhalter. McKennie and Musso were always going to be there. Those are the 2 starters. And then Luca De La Torre, I like that inclusion. He's had a pretty good season. He's got a different profile. Someone who can definitely drive the ball forward a lot and can get involved in the attack from midfield, which is something a lot of our other midfielders lack. And then the other 2 are Sebastian Lletget and Christian Roldan. So Lletget and Roldan, they're both guys who maybe don't deserve to be in this team. Christian Roldan more so. I think Roldan's never proven anything for the national team. 30 caps, and I think he's only had like 2 good games in that entire time. That I can think of, Christian Roldan has had 2 good games for the national team. And they were both substitute appearances. That's all I'm going to say about him, because I really don't think he has any place in the national team. Sebastian Lletget, I'll be a little bit less critical of, because in the past he has been more proven for the national team. He has contributed for the national team quite a bit in the past 2 years. But his form has really dropped off a lot since September. He was pretty decent in September. After that, since then, his form for club and country has dropped off. So I don't think he's really shown anything since the end of the September window that really has earned him a call-up. And I think Djordje Mihailovic is someone who should have been here. Now, I know Gianluca Buzio would have been here over De La Torre if he didn't get COVID. Djordje Mihailovic is probably the biggest snub from the midfield for me. He had the most assists in MLS last season, still only 22 years old at that point. And yeah, he's a completely different player to last time we saw him for the national team, all the way back in 2019 when he was 20 years old. I think after the year he had last year in Montreal, and according to several reports, he was one of the top performers this January camp for Berhalter. What more does he have to prove? He spent a couple weeks over in Italy training with Bologna, who are a good team in Serie A. He's got that high-level experience in the last couple of months. What more does he need to do to get into this national team? I really don't know, but we can only hope that Berhalter, his view of him as a player has improved, because he's someone who I think can bring a lot to this team, and it would have been someone nice to have against the low blocks that are going to be Honduras and El Salvador. Maybe not to start, but someone who can maybe piece them apart, break them down like a Gio would. Obviously, he's out injured, but yeah, it is what it is. And yeah, but I think I'd like to see McKennie and Musa getting most of the minutes as an 8. And if Lletget and De La Torre get some, that's fine. I just don't want to see Roldan see the field very much here. But you know he's going to see the field against El Salvador because his brother plays for them too. And I guess that's just how it is. And one more guy I just quickly wanted to mention is Alex Mendez, because people have been talking about him lately. And rightfully so. He's been having a pretty solid season over in Portugal. And I don't think he's earned a national team call-up yet. But it's someone to keep an eye on, and I would absolutely keep an eye on him between now and the coming months, because he's someone who may be able to contribute in the near future for the men's national team, but not right away. So keep an eye on him for sure. On to the wingers, and we have 5, and there are 0 surprises here. Brenden Aaronson, Paul Arriola, Jordan Morris, who's coming back from a long-term injury, but he should be close to full fitness now, Christian Pulisic, the face of this team, and Timothy Weah, who's maybe a bit of a surprise because he's just come back from injury. It looked like he was not going to be back in time for this window, but all of a sudden he shows up in the midweek squad, gets a couple of minutes, and then started the game this weekend and got a full 68 minutes. So I think there are 0 surprises here. Brenden Aaronson, Christian Pulisic, and Timothy Weah. Those are 3 guys who will probably be getting the lion's share of the minutes, assuming that Weah is fit. Berhalter does really like Paul Arriola, so I think Arriola might even get a start in there, but you could argue that he may not get as much. Also, there are trade talks circulating with Arriola, so he may not be a DC United player much longer. Jordan Morris is interesting. I think his role for the national team is a guy off the bench. I just think that's how he would be best utilized, because he can bring that different aspect as well. But yeah, Gio Reyna's not here. He's still injured. He should be back by March. He should be back probably in about 2 weeks for Dortmund. I feel like Marco Rosa is telling him to slow down. Wait till after the international break. We don't want you to go get injured in the cold if you're just coming back from injury, because these games are all going to be below 25 degrees in Fahrenheit. Conor de la Fuente is also injured, though I don't think he would have been in this roster regardless. And then another guy I just wanted to mention because he had a good December camp. I don't think he would have been anywhere near this roster regardless, but Kevin Paredes also is not fit, at least the last I heard. So I don't think he'll be here. But he may be in the U20 roster, which as of recording has not dropped yet. On to the center forwards. There are 3. And, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say here, because Ricardo Pepi should, and I repeat, should be getting most of the minutes. Gyasi Zardes is another Berhalter favorite. He's probably going to get a start in there. And Jesus Ferreira is probably going to be a guy who's going to come off the bench 2 or 3 games. He's a completely different profile to any other striker in the pool, and maybe someone who we bring on if we're trying to preserve a lead. But yeah, Ricardo Pepi has had an interesting mixed bag of a start at Augsburg. The other 2 interesting, Gyasi Zardes didn't have the best year for Columbus. Jesus Ferreira just signed a designated player contract in Dallas. So we'll see how the striker position pans out, but as I said, Pepi will probably start 2 games and should get the lion's share of the minutes. Josh Sargent was left off the roster, though he did score 2 goals for Norwich on Friday. Good for him. Unfortunately, he didn't get those goals until after the roster had come out, missing the release by about 30 minutes. Jordan Pifok and Daryl Dike are not here either. I believe that's because Berhalter and the national team staff just don't really like their profile. That's understandable. It doesn't necessarily fit the way we play, but I like having Daryl Dike as an option on the bench. That being said, Dike is hurt. He just got hurt again, like the day after the roster dropped, so he wouldn't have been able to come anyway. But, you know, I'm sure you feel what I'm saying there. Other than that, though, there's a lot of MLS players. 13 to be precise, which is, I believe, the most out of any qualifying roster so far. I don't think it's just because there's a bias toward MLS. I just think that in general, Berhalter likes guys that he's familiar with, and those players from MLS happen to be the guys that's familiar. It's not because it's an MLS thing. It's kind of just a familiarity thing, and those happen to be the MLS guys. And I have a feeling that the Berhalter favorites, so to speak, I feel like Jesus Ferreira has become part of that group. So, yeah, I guess he's the new entry into that club. But other than that, I think this is definitely a good enough roster to get 7 points, to get 9 points, fingers crossed. But we got to take this one game at a time. Let's take a look at maybe very, very quickly before we wrap up the video what the lineup for this team could look like. As I said, this is going to have to be one game at a time. We're going to have to focus on El Salvador, then focus on Canada, then focus on Honduras. And there are lots of variables, as there are in every qualifying, so this is impossible to predict who is going to get a yellow card suspension, who's going to get injured, who's going to be tired, who's going to drop an absolute stinker in the first game, who's going to just ball out of nowhere. We don't know any of that stuff yet. But this is probably the best team that can be fielded, and hopefully this is the team we'll see against Canada, because I think this is the most important game. I think the other two games we should take care of business pretty much regardless of who we put on the field. Zach Steffen is the goalkeeper. Chris Richards at left center back just because he's in season and has been superb and probably going to be at Bayern next season. Miles Robinson is probably our best center back and most important center back at the moment, so I have him at right center back. But again, Chris Richards is catching up with him, and if Miles Robinson doesn't make the jump to Europe, I don't see him improving very much. And then the two fullbacks are obviously Destin Robinson. As I said, there's only one left back on this roster, so unless Robinson can somehow play all 3 games, which I wouldn't rule out because he is in the championship and they do play lots of games like that in a week, but Serginho Dest is going to be the right back, and if Dest needs to start one game at left back, we'll see, and probably would be Yedlin coming in on the right. And then the midfield MMA is our best midfield. I mean, I see a timeline where Adams only starts one game this window. Like, hypothetically, if he gets rested the first game to avoid a yellow card, and then starts against Canada and gets a yellow card, he would only start one game. But I think we should try to run MMA as much as possible just because the midfield alternatives are not that good. Luca De La Torre, Sebastian Lletget, Christian Roldan. So I'd love to see MMA as much as possible. And then with the wingers, Pulisic's going to be on the left. He might even start all 3 games. I think that's pretty likely. Brendan Aronson will probably start the first game. We don't know what Tim Weah's fitness situation is going to be, but he should get minutes wherever he can. And Ricardo Pepi, as I said, should get whatever minutes he can at the striker position. But with all that being said, that's the end of the video. So let me know, how many points did we get out of this window? Who else maybe should have made this team who I didn't even mention? Let me know in the comments. But other than that, I'll see you guys very soon. We're going to be bringing some videos to you throughout this international break and throughout the rest of 2022. So I'll see you guys later.